Keel Newsmaker Hotline. Scott Wolverton is Shreveport Fire Department Chief. Hey, Mr. Scott, welcome back to Keel. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. How are y'all?
Excellent, thank you, sir. Let's start here with the quarantine, with the restrictions, with the movement, with all the rules that are in place. How is that, if at all, affecting day-to-day operations of the SFD?
Really haven't seen any major effects. We tried to do everything we can to protect our personnel, and I'll have to say, I think our following the guidelines of protection that the Center for Disease Control and our Office of Public Health have put forth are working, because as of right now, we only have 2 firefighters that have tested positive for COVID, and actually both of them were not at work; they were on vacation. So we're utilizing a level of personal protective equipment that they're recommending, and it does appear to be doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. And I have to applaud our firefighters, because they're taking those guidelines seriously, and they're putting those barriers in place every time they may have potential interaction with a COVID patient, and it appears to be working.
I was going to say I drove by one of the stations the other day, because they're all over the place, as you know, and there were 4 or 5 firefighters outside. They were all standing about 8 to 10 feet apart, and they were all wearing masks. Is that part of the rules, or were they doing that voluntarily?
We've asked for them to social distance at the fire station. We've also gave them the option of wearing a cloth mask while at work and interacting around one another. That was a CDC recommendation that came out about 2 weeks ago. We've had some very generous companies that have provided, some church groups and ladies groups that have provided some cloth masks for our members, and they are utilizing that and trying to practice what everyone else has been asked to practice.
Is there any extra precautions, any sort of the standard operating procedure for like EMTs and paramedics and stuff like that when they go on a call?
Yes. When we actually go on an emergency medical call, there's a level of personal protective equipment they have to have in place. We have an algorithm set forth that we follow, whether that patient is screened through dispatch, or if that screening misses from a third-party call, we have a screening process on scene. We only allow one firefighter to start treating and interviewing the patient about 6 to 8 feet away. All the other members stay back, and then they come in, and it's really dictated by the call and the severity of the patient and what's going on with the patient. But we're utilizing everything that we can to minimize exposure to firefighters on a lot of these calls.
Is the PPE being worn by paramedics, et cetera? Is it a screen, a standard mask? If something happens to me today and I look up, what am I going to see?
You're going to see a firefighter with a N95 mask, or what's called an air purifying respirator. They will have safety glasses on. They will have some type of gown on. It may be a disposable gown. It may be a Tyvek gown. It may actually be a raincoat. We were utilizing raincoats due to the gown shortage, and we actually purchased those. They're splash proof, easily deconned, and reusable. And then they'll also have gloves on. So they're going to have that full protection barrier on when they make contact with a patient. Another thing that we're doing, put in place about 3 weeks ago, we also place a mask on every patient. As soon as we arrive on scene, whether they're determined to be potentially COVID or not, or actually are, we actually place a mask on the patient once we arrive on scene.
Chief, let's get to something I know is troubling you today, though you and I haven't talked about it. The potential of facing cutbacks. The city is going to be facing severe financial troubles, and it looks like all departments may have to do some trimming. What are you looking at? What is possible within the fire department to trim?
Well, it's sort of hard to say right now. We're hoping that we're going to get some federal funding support, hopefully from this next stimulus package. I don't think this last one had specific stimulus money set aside for a municipality's just normal operating cost. So hopefully we're going to see that in this next stimulus package. We're also looking at some other options. I know y'all talked with Chief Whitehorn the other day, and he explained some of those options, maybe a finance finance package or something like that. So that's going to be the first, trying to do those things without having to make cuts. And then, if you get into cuts, it's going to be very difficult. You're going to have to any decision going forward is going to be very difficult. And what we'll have to do as a department is prioritize that. With the priority being, keeping our level of service to our citizens that needs to be there.
Chief, is
So
there a
it's,
real possibility that fire stations could close?
It will depend on how deep the cuts go. And, I'm hoping and praying that we receive some help. I'm hoping and praying that the projected shortfall maybe won't be as much as it is on the sales tax. May 1st, we'll see the March numbers, and that's probably going to be a good indicator of kind of what we're going to be facing in sales tax revenue loss, because that's the primary funding source for general fund departments. So it just depends on how deep those cuts have to go.
I don't know if there's a hiring freeze currently in place. I don't know what the status was of at the fire academy. Update us on that too.
Well, we were about to start processing the class, but as of right now, that will be on hold because not knowing what we know and the impact of the month and a half on the stay-at-home order, and if it extends into May, you're trying to conserve as much 2020 budget funding as you have right now. So we're doing everything we can to conserve this year's budget funding based on the impact we know that's going to happen, that we still got to get through the end of the fiscal year to December.
Chief, is your last resort laying off firefighters?
It will be the absolute last resort.
And your message to them today?
My message to them today is we're public servants. We accepted and took an oath to perform our jobs, and they do it well every day. And I'm going to do my absolute best, and I think our mayor and our city administration and our city council, they're going to do their absolute best to try to minimize the impact of the shortfall as much as possible.